My name's Grace. And I never imagined that the child I raised with everything I had would one day look me in the eyes and tell me I wasn't welcome at her wedding. It happened on a quiet Sunday afternoon. I was cooking her favorite mill-roasted chicken, sweet potatoes, and honey biscuits because she said she wanted to talk. I was excited. I thought she wanted my help with wedding planning. I thought she wanted her mother beside her. But when she walked into my kitchen, her eyes were cold. She didn't hug me. She didn't smile. She just stood there like a stranger. Then she said it. "Mum, you're not invited to my wedding." The wooden spoon slipped from my hand. I felt like the air was punched out of my chest. I asked quietly, "Baby, why would you say that?" She crossed her arms and said, "You're too emotional, Mum, too. Old-fashioned. Mark wants a modern, elegant wedding. And you don't fit the theme." Mark, her fiancé, a man I never trusted. And right on cue, he appeared behind her, leaning against the doorway with that smug little smirk. He said, "Nothing personal, Miss Grace. Weddings are about image. I'm sure you understand." No, I did not understand. My daughter, my only child, was choosing image over her own mother. I whispered, "You're ashamed of me." She didn't deny it. She just said, "Please don't make this harder. Just stay away. We'll send you pictures afterward." Pictures of my daughter's wedding, the one I wasn't allowed to attend. They left my house without finishing the food I made. I sat at the table for an hour staring at the doorway, hoping she'd come back and say it was a joke. But she didn't. That night, I cried quietly so no one would hear. But a mother knows when something is wrong. And something about Mark had always felt wrong. The very next morning, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Are you Grace? I need to tell you something about Mark." My heart dropped. The woman said her name was Rachel. She used to date Mark, and she told me everything. How he controlled her. How he cut her off from her family. How he made her quit her job. How he drained her savings. How he isolated her so he could manipulate her. Then she wrote, "Your daughter is next. He's starting the same pattern, and he always begins by turning them against their mothers." I felt sick. Every moment made sense now. The distance, the coldness, the disrespect, the wedding image. I thanked the woman. She apologized for not speaking sooner. I told her she had just saved my daughter's life. But I couldn't just run to my daughter. She wouldn't listen to me anymore. So I made a plan. 2 days before the wedding, I sent her a message. "I respect your decision. I will not attend the wedding, but I want to send you a gift. Please open it privately." She didn't reply, but I knew she would open it. I packed a simple white box. Inside it, I placed a printed copy of Rachel's message. Screenshots of Mark's controlling behavior. Financial records showing he'd taken money from 3 previous girlfriends. Police reports. Restraining orders. And on top of it all, I placed a letter. But my daughter finally saw him for who he really was. Now she lives with me again. She goes to therapy. She's healing. We're healing. You may not want me at your wedding, but I will always protect you, even from a distance. Mun. The next morning at 6 a.m., my doorbell rang. It was my daughter. Her mascara was smeared, her hair a mess, her hands shaking. She fell into my arms, sobbing. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I was blind. He almost trapped me. You saved me." I held her tight. "I didn't say I told you so." A mother doesn't say that. A mother just holds her child. She cancelled the wedding that same day. Mark tried to call, tried to show up, tried everything. And last week, she sat beside me, held my hand and said, "Mum, when I get married someday, you will walk me down the aisle." And that was the moment everything finally felt right again. Because sometimes a mother doesn't need to be invited to the wedding. She's the one who saves it. After my daughter collapsed into my arms crying, everything should have gotten better. But healing doesn't happen in one night. And the truth, the real truth, was still waiting for her. She spent that day in my house, curled up on the couch, barely speaking. I made her tea. I held her hand. I let her cry without saying a word. "Mama, I don't understand how I didn't see it," she whispered. I brushed her hair back and said softly, because when you love someone, baby, you see what you want to see. But deep down, I knew Mark wasn't done. Men like him never walk away quietly. That night, around 10 p.m., my daughter's phone began buzzing non-stop. 20 missed calls, then 30, then messages. You ruined everything. You're overreacting. Come home now. You're making a mistake. You need me. My daughter's hands were shaking so badly, I had to take the phone from her. I read every message. Every word showed the same thing. Control. Manipulation. Fear. She whispered, Mama, what do I do? I said, baby, you don't go anywhere. But you do read the rest of what's in that box I gave you, because she hadn't opened everything yet. She took a deep breath, opened the box again, and pulled out the files she hadn't looked at. The first document stopped her cold. It was a restraining order, filed by Rachel, against Mark. Her lips trembled. Mama, he told me she was crazy. I said, baby, abusers always say that about the people they hurt. Then she found the bank statements, the ones showing how Mark drained Rachel's account. Her eyes widened. He told me she stole from him. No, sweetheart, I said. He stole from her, and he was planning to steal from you next. Then she found something she hadn't expected. A contract. A marriage contract written by Mark's lawyer. A contract that said if they married, all her income, savings, and assets would legally become his. She covered her mouth. Mama, I never signed this. But he told me I needed to bring it to the wedding for formalities. I looked at her. Baby, he wasn't marrying you for love. He was marrying you for ownership. Her whole body shook. At midnight, she finally fell asleep on the couch. But I stayed awake, because I knew men like Mark don't give up when they lose control. And I was right. At 2:17 a.m., someone started banging on my front door. My daughter shot awake instantly. Mama, that's him. I told her go to the bedroom. Lock the door. I walked to the door calmly and said through the wood, you need to leave. He shouted, let me talk to her. She is my fiancée. No, I'd said, she's not. That set him off. He kicked my door. He threatened me. He yelled loud enough to wake the entire neighborhood. But I never opened the door. My daughter stood behind me, crying silently. Finally, after 15 minutes of screaming, he drove off. My daughter collapsed into my arms again. Mama, I'm scared. I held her tight and whispered, the thing about evil men, baby, is that when they lose control, they fall apart. The next morning, we went to the police with all the evidence from the box. They took everything seriously. The restraining orders, the financial theft, the coercion, the harassment, the messages from last night. My daughter gave her statement. Her voice was shaking, but she spoke every word. For the first time in months, I saw the old version of her. Strong, brave, clear-minded. On the ride home, she held my hand and said, Mum, I almost married a monster. I squeezed her hand gently. Baby, monsters hide best behind good manners and fake smiles. A week passed. She stayed with me. She started therapy. She cut off every contact with Mark. And then something happened that neither of us expected. Rachel, the woman who warned me, came to visit. She and my daughter sat together at the kitchen table for hours. Two women who had been manipulated by the same man, finally understanding that none of it was their fault. She told my daughter the things Mark said about her, the lies he told, the plans he had, and my daughter cried again, not out of pain, but out of relief. Because now she knew the truth. Because now she knew she wasn't weak, or stupid, or blind. She was simply loved by the wrong man. 3 weeks later, my daughter said something that made my heart melt. Mama, when I get married, really married, you're not just invited. You're going to walk me down the aisle. And that was the moment I knew she was healed. Because sometimes a mother's love doesn't just protect. Sometimes a mother's love saves a life. 3 peaceful weeks had passed. My daughter was finally smiling again. Her hair looked healthier. Her voice no longer cracked when she spoke. She was coming back to life piece by piece. But peace doesn't last long when a dangerous man feels humiliated. And Mark was the type of man who couldn't stand losing control. It started on a Tuesday afternoon. I was watering my plants when I noticed a black car parked across the street. Engine off, windows tinted, not moving. It stayed there for 2 hours. At first I ignored it, but as I walked back inside, something in my stomach twisted. I locked the door, closed the curtains, and went to check on my daughter. She was in the living room, sipping tea and watching some cooking show. I didn't want to worry her, so I stayed quiet. But that night, the same black car returned. Only this time, the headlights were aimed directly at my house. The beams stayed on for a long, uncomfortable minute. Then the car slowly rolled away. I felt cold inside. I knew who it was, and I knew this wasn't over. The next morning, as we walked outside to get the mail, something was taped to my front door. A white envelope. My daughter's name written on the front. In handwriting she knew too well. Her hand started trembling immediately. I took it from her gently and opened it. Inside was just one sentence. If I can't have you, no one will. My daughter collapsed to her knees. I grabbed her shoulders and whispered, "Baby, this is fear talking, not power." We went straight to the police. They filed it as harassment. They told us they'd look into it, but I've lived long enough to know. Men like Mark don't stop because someone files a report. They stop when someone stops them. That night, around 1 a.m., I woke up to footsteps outside our house. Slow, deliberate, crunching the gravel near my bedroom window. I froze. Then I heard it. A man whispering, "I know you're in there." My blood ran ice cold. I grabbed my daughter from her room and we hid in the hallway. Lights off, holding each other as quietly as we could. The whispering stopped, but the footsteps continued for several minutes. Then silence. It took everything in me not to panic. The next morning, I called Rachel, the ex-girlfriend who had warned us. Maybe she knew something. What she told me next made my knees go weak. She said, "I didn't tell you everything about Mark. He wasn't just abusive. He was dangerous." I asked her, "What do you mean dangerous?" She hesitated, then said, "Before me, he was engaged to another woman." She disappeared. I felt the floor drop out from under me. "Disappeared?" I whispered. "Yes," she said. "Vanished. Police investigated him but couldn't prove anything. He was the last person to see her alive. Asterisk, asterisk." I felt sick. My daughter heard the whole thing. She slid down the wall, shaking uncontrollably. "Mama, he could have killed me." I held her face in my hands and said firmly, "Baby, that's exactly why we're not running. We're fighting." We called a private investigator, someone respected. Experienced, not lazy like the police. His name was David. Broad shoulders, sharp eyes, a man who looked like he'd seen the worst parts of humanity. We gave him the screenshots, the threatening note, the police reports, Rachel's story, the marriage contract, everything. Then David said something chilling. "Mark isn't just controlling. He's escalating. And escalations like this end one of two ways. Arrest or tragedy." He promised us he would find every piece of Mark's hidden life. What he uncovered, no mother is prepared to hear. 3 days later, David came back with a file so thick it looked like a book. Arrest records from 2 states, 2 restraining orders, a dismissed assault charge, bank fraud investigations, a previous fiancé who vanished and was never found, a former co-worker who told police Mark threatened to make her disappear too, and worst of all, a handwritten list. Names, dates, amounts of money stolen from each woman he dated. At the bottom of the list was my daughter's name. Next to it, an empty space, waiting to be filled. My daughter broke down crying uncontrollably. "Mama, he was planning everything. He was going to take everything I have." And then, she couldn't finish. I held her as tight as I could. "Baby, you survived him, but now we're going to stop him." We handed everything to the detectives. This time their eyes widened. They took it seriously. Within hours, a warrant was issued. They found Mark in his apartment. Bags packed, passport ready, cash in envelopes. He was planning to run, but they caught him before he left. When they handcuffed him, he screamed. She was mine. She belonged to me. The officer said he fought like a rabid animal. My daughter watched it on the news, tears streaming down her face. Mama, he's gone. He can't hurt me anymore. I hugged her and whispered, baby, he never had power. He only had fear. And you broke free from it. A month later, my daughter was calm again, peaceful again. She went back to work. She started laughing. She even planted flowers in my backyard. And one evening, while we were drinking tea on the porch, she said quietly, Mama, you didn't just save me. You saved the woman I was supposed to become. And that was the first moment I truly breathed again. Because sometimes the villain doesn't win. Sometimes the monster gets dragged into the light. And sometimes a mother's love doesn't just save her daughter. It saves every woman who will never have to meet that monster again. My daughter thought everything was finally over. The crying, the nightmares, the fear, the controlling voice of Mark echoing in her mind. But trauma doesn't disappear just because the man is gone. It lingers. It hides in the corners of your thoughts. And it shows up when you least expect it. 2 weeks after the restraining order was filed, my daughter came downstairs trembling. Her hands were cold. Her breathing was short. I held her face gently and asked, Baby, what happened? She whispered, Mum, I dreamed he was standing at the end of my bed, just staring. She broke down again. I wrapped my arms around her and said, Baby, he can't get to you. You're safe. And you're not alone. But I knew she needed more than reassurance. She needed closure. And closure came sooner than either of us expected. The following Tuesday, we received a letter from the police department. Inside was a court date. Mark had filed a request to contest the restraining order. My daughter froze. Mama, I can't see him. I'm not ready. I squeezed her hand. Baby, abusers count on fear to silence you. But you're stronger than you think. And I'll be sitting right next to you. The day of the hearing arrived. My daughter dressed simply, no makeup, no jewelry, nothing fancy. Just a woman showing up to take her power back. When we entered the courtroom, Mark was already there. He looked different. Not confident. Not controlled. Not smug. He looked furious. Like my daughter had ruined the perfect picture he painted of himself. He didn't even acknowledge me. His eyes were locked on her, watching her every move. When the judge asked him to speak first, he sighed dramatically and said, Your Honor, she's being manipulated by her mother. I never hurt her. I never controlled her. She's just emotional. She always overreacts. He delivered those lines like he'd practiced them in the mirror. Then it was my daughter's turn. Her hands shook a little, but her voice was powerful. She said, Your Honor, this man isolated me from my friends, my job, and my own mother. He lied about his past. He tried to take control of my finances. He pressured me into signing marriage papers that would have given him everything. I owned. He screamed at me. He threatened me. He scared me. Mark scoffed, arms crossed. But then she said the one thing that shattered his act. Your Honor, I wasn't just scared of losing him. I was scared of losing myself. Even the judge looked moved. When it was time for evidence, I handed over the box, the same white box from... Inside were the messages, the voice recordings, the restraining orders from other women, the financial statements, everything. The judge flipped through them slowly. Mark's face drained of color. He wasn't angry anymore. He was terrified. The judge slammed the folder shut and said, Restraining order approved. And extended. My daughter let out a breath she'd been holding for months. But then something happened no one expected. As we got up to leave, Mark finally spoke. His voice wasn't angry. It wasn't manipulative. It was broken. He said, I didn't want to lose you. My daughter turned to him and said something I will remember for the rest of my life. You didn't lose me. You never had me. You only controlled me. And she walked out of that courtroom taller than she'd ever stood. On the way home, she was quiet. Not sad. Not shaken. Quiet in the way a person is when a chapter finally closes. That night, we sat on the couch eating ice cream. She leaned her head on my shoulder and whispered, "Mum, I feel free." I kissed her forehead and said, "Baby, freedom isn't the absence of fear. It's taking your life back anyway." She smiled, a real smile. And that was the night I knew my daughter wasn't just surviving anymore. She was healing. She was growing. She was reclaiming herself. And she was never, ever going to let a man like Mark break her again. Because when a woman finally sees the truth, she becomes unstoppable. After weeks of healing, after weeks of rebuilding herself, my daughter thought she was done with Mark. She thought she was free, but abusers never leave quietly. It was a warm Saturday morning when my daughter said she wanted to run a quick errand alone. A simple grocery trip. Something normal. Something peaceful. She left, smiling. She came back shaking. I saw her standing at the doorway, clutching the grocery bag so tight her knuckles were white. I rushed to her. "Baby, what happened?" She whispered, "He found me." My heart dropped. She told me everything. She was walking toward her car when she heard her name. Not softly, not kindly, but like a command. "Emily." She turned. Mark was standing at the corner of the parking lot, leaning against a black car, arms crossed like he owned the world. He smirked. "You think you can hide from me?" She froze. People walked by. No one realized she was in danger. Abusers can look completely normal on the outside. He walked toward her, slow and controlled. "You embarrassed me. You made me look like a fool. You owe me an apology." She whispered, "Leave me alone." He stepped closer. "You think you're safe because your mummy is protecting you?" She tried to move around him, but he grabbed her wrist, tight enough to leave marks. "Emily, you're mine." She pulled away and shouted, "I'm not yours." Right then, thank God, a man nearby turned around and yelled, "Hey, let her go." Mark stepped back immediately, pretending like nothing happened. He smiled at her and said, "This isn't over." Then he walked away, just disappeared behind rows of cars. She said she felt her entire body collapse inside her chest. She drove home crying, shaking, terrified. I hugged her as tight as I could and whispered, "Baby, that man isn't brave. He's desperate. And desperate men make mistakes." We filed a report. We added the new incident. But this time, the police took it even more seriously. For the first time, my daughter felt like the law was finally on her side. But the story wasn't over, because Mark wasn't done, and he had one more surprise waiting for us. 3 days after the parking lot incident, I opened the front door to pick up the mail. Bills, ads, coupons, and then an envelope. No name, no return address, just one word written on the front. "Emily." I felt something cold run down my spine. I handed it to her. "Baby, this came for you." Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. A printed message. No handwriting, no signature. Just one paragraph. "If you don't return what belongs to me, I will take back everything myself. You have 7 days. We stared at each other. "What belongs to him?" She whispered. I knew. It wasn't an object. It wasn't money. It was control. Ownership. The power he felt he lost. And he wanted it back. I said, "Baby, this is a threat." She nodded. But then she pulled something else from the envelope. A photograph. A picture of her car, taken the night before, while it was parked outside our house. My daughter dropped the picture. Her breathing went shallow. He was here. I grabbed her hands. "Look at me, baby. He wants fear. He feeds on fear. But he's slipping. He's making mistakes. And we're going to use every one of them." We went straight to the police. This time, they didn't treat us like an inconvenience. A detective took the letter, the photo, the prior evidence, and said, "This is escalation. We're opening a full case." They assigned her a protective order immediately. But the detective said something that made my daughter freeze. "Men like him don't back off because of paperwork. Be careful. He might show up again." That night, my daughter couldn't sleep. She sat beside me on the couch, hugging a pillow. "Mama, why won't he stop?" I brushed her hair gently. "Because, baby, when a controlling man loses his grip, his ego breaks. And broken egos are dangerous. But then, out of nowhere, there was a silver lining. Something came that neither of us expected. Something that turned the entire case upside down. A call from Rachel, the woman who warned me in the first place. She said, "Grace, Emily, I found something you need to see." She showed us messages, screenshots, financial records, all proving that Mark wasn't just manipulating women. He was committing fraud. Real serious fraud. And now, we had enough evidence to bury him legally. My daughter looked at me with tears in her eyes. "Mama, this might finally end." I held her hand and whispered, "Baby, it doesn't might end. It will end." But the ending wasn't peaceful. Because before the police got to him, Mark came to us one last time. This is the final part of this arc. It was almost midnight. The house was quiet. My daughter was asleep on the sofa beside me. I was watching the news softly when I heard it. A car engine, idling outside our home. I looked through the window. A black sedan. No lights. Just sitting there. My heart pounded. I whispered, "Baby, wake up." She opened her eyes slowly. "What happened?" "He's here," I whispered. She froze. We stood in silence as footsteps crunched on the gravel outside. Then, a shadow passed the living room window. Slow, deliberate, like he wanted us to know he was there. He knocked once. Not hard, not loud, but with a confidence that made my blood run cold. I whispered, "Don't make a sound." My phone was already calling 911. We stood behind the couch, holding our breath, as he knocked again. Then he spoke through the door. Calm, cold, too calm. "Emily, open the door. We need to talk." My daughter shook her head violently. "Mama, I'm scared." I held her tight. The operator stayed on the line. Then suddenly, Mark's voice changed. He started pounding hard. "Open the door. You ruined my life. You're going to pee for this?" The pounding got louder, more desperate, unhinged. My daughter cried into my shoulder, "Mama, he's going to break the door." And I whispered something I knew she needed. "No, baby, he's breaking himself." Then, police sirens, blue lights flashing. Mark's shouting stopped instantly. We watched through the window as he froze like a hunted animal. He tried to run. He didn't get far. Police tackled him to the ground right in our yard. My daughter collapsed to her knees, sobbing. "It's over, Mama. It's finally over." I wrapped my arms around her and whispered the words I'd been waiting to say for so long. "Yes, baby. You're safe." The police took him away that night. Multiple charges. Multiple victims stepping forward. My daughter's story helped them all. Today she finally laughs again. She goes to work. She loves life. She breathes freely. And every morning, she tells me, "Mama, thank you for saving me when I couldn't save myself." And I always answer, "No, baby, you saved yourself. I just held the light." Because sometimes a mother doesn't just protect her child. A mother teaches her how to survive the darkness and walk back into the light. My daughter was finally starting to breathe again. But life has a strange way of testing you right when you think the storm has passed. One morning she walked to the porch to get the mail and froze because sitting on top of the mailbox was an envelope. Her name written in big, bold handwriting. But we knew the handwriting. It was Mark's. Her hands trembled as she brought it inside. "Mama, should I open it?" I took the envelope gently and held it up to the light. No threats. No return address. Just her name. I handed it back. "You open it when you're ready, baby." She took a deep breath and tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper. One sentence. "You ruined my life. So I'm going to make sure you think about me forever." She dropped the paper. "Mama, what does he mean? What does that mean?" Before I could answer, the doorbell rang. We both jumped. I walked to the door slowly, my heart pounding. But it wasn't Mark. It was a police officer. "Are you Grace and Emma?" he asked. We nodded. "We need to speak with you both about a vehicle registered to Mark Rivers." My daughter gasped. "What happened?" The officer lowered his voice. "It was found abandoned outside city limits. Inside, we found items belonging to both of you. Your pictures, letters, clothes, personal documents. My stomach twisted. This wasn't love. This wasn't heartbreak. This was obsession. The officer continued. Based on what we've found, it appears he was watching the house. My daughter covered her mouth. Mama, he's been here. The officer looked at us seriously. You two should not go anywhere alone. We've issued a temporary protection detail. After he left, my daughter stared at the letter again. Mama, what if he tries to hurt us? I wrapped my arms around her. Baby, if he tries anything, the whole world will know who he really is. But inside, I knew something else. This wasn't over. Not yet. 3 nights later, everything exploded. It was almost midnight. I was sitting in the living room knitting, trying to stay calm. My daughter was upstairs sleeping peacefully for the first time in weeks. Then, the motion sensor light outside flicked on. I looked out the window. Nothing. Then it flicked on again. And this time,